right, hello everyone. I hope everyone's having a fabulous Wednesday. If you are currently teaching courses, you should be halfway through the semester. And we're happy to have you guys join us today for Revitalizing courses for real world impact. Welcome again. So today we have a couple of different cohorts. So we have our 325X grantees, we have our 325M grantees who were funded in 23, and then we should also have some 325Ms who were funded in 24. So we're all going to get along just fine today. So I will be one of your presenters today. I'm Maria Silva. I am the program director with the Dream Center. I'm the one who kind of manages most of the stuff on the website, so you should be familiar with my emails. And I'm also presenting today with Dr. Coretta Doss. She is a postdoctoral associate who joined the Dream Center recently and has been an amazing asset and wealth of information. So I'm looking forward to you guys hearing from her today. Just a quick recap. So we are the delivering resources, education, and access and mentorship. And our focus, our goal is to help universities build their programs, apply for federal grants, and manage those grants. So we are continuing with this as we embark on year 2, expanding and strengthening the workforce, enhancing that program quality, as well as preparing you to create some grants. Today's objectives are to enhance courses, but obviously we want to align those with standards and also deliver more meaningful learning experiences. We want to look into how we can redesign assignments to ensure purpose, impact, and also that real world application and relevance. We want to adopt new dynamic engagement methods. So I'm hoping that you guys are willing to change a little bit of your previous practices. If you tend to be more traditional based, I'm going to show you a few different ideas. And we're also going to look into creating informative rubrics that guide student success. I wanted to start by giving you that connection for the language that's written into your grants. So for my 325Xs, we know that you're working on developing these new programs for special education preparation and related services. And you're focusing on developing programs. And now you should be around the part of, since you've embarked on year 2, is these preparation of courses and developing your outline and your plan for application of what you plan on sharing with them and teaching your scholars. So we're focusing on evidence-based and aligned with the new skills that are needed to prepare this new workforce. And our 325Ms, you were tasked with a very specific request in your NIA and in your grant agreement to work with personnel preparation, align them with state and national standards. Same thing, evidence-based coursework, coordinated clinical experiences. We want to build the capacity of those individuals who will be then serving students with disabilities. And some of the things that were outlined in your grant NIA were updated coursework, course outcomes, scholar competencies, and assignments. So I'm going to pass it over to Coretta, and she's going to get us started with why course revitalization matters.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to kick us off with a poll by asking, which of these are your biggest challenges in course design? Is it aligning with standards, keeping students engaged, designated meaningful assignments, or is it grading and rubric clarity?
So far, it looks like their biggest challenge is designing meaningful assignments.
All right, well, that's great because we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about that today. Awesome. Well, that's a good segue. It's clear from the poll that many of us face similar challenges when it comes to course design. So before we get into ways that we can revitalize our courses today, we're going to talk about some of those challenges. So sometimes our biggest intentions don't fully align. There's often like a gap between what we say students will learn and what we actually assess, and leaving assignments disconnected from core program goals. So that means students stay busy, but they may not be building the essential skills that we want them to carry forward. Another challenge comes from relying too much on traditional formats, such as traditional lectures or the traditional discussion posts or formats, which keeps students passive rather than engaged within the learning. When we don't embrace technology, multimedia, or collaborative learning, we can end up missing critical chances in order to have students connect with the way today's learners process and use information. These challenges can go beyond alignments and methods. They affect how we grade, how students interpret the feedback they receive, and even sometimes their motivation. So often traditional assessments focus on recall instead of real understanding. And sometimes the grading systems might be inconsistent and more aligned with instructor interpretations. So feedback might not be that readily available. And there could be inconsistency in the grading. When rubrics aren't clear for students and for the faculty, there's often ambiguity, and this also leads to inconsistency. This all leads to disengagement, and students may see assignments as busy work instead of meaningful preparations for teaching. And when tasks don't connect with real context, motivation, participation, and retention will often drop off. So to bridge the gap in the course design, like misalignment and disengagement, which can happen when we have these challenges, we start by grounding the courses in the course standards and linking them to our authentic applied learning experiences for our students. So what we want to do is, in order to connect the course standards to real world learning, use the standards as an anchor. It's almost like they're a GPS, and they ensure that the focus is going to be on the professional readiness and not finishing a course, not just finishing the course that is. When assignments connect to real competencies and accreditation goals, the students are going to be able to understand the why, and this boosts their investment in what they're learning. Designing learning that goes beyond grading means that we're helping students to view themselves as future educators, not just as a current student, but when we create experience in which they actually are in the midst of the role of what they would be undertaking if they were in a classroom setting. And we want to integrate authentic learning where theory is going to meet practice. And that could be through case studies, role plays, simulations, so that students can rehearse the actual real decisions that would be, and the challenges that they face in authentic settings. And finally, we want to ensure that we are planning goals that are developing and preparing educators. When everything aligns, the standards, the skills, and authentic practice, then the students are going to gain a true coordination and confidence in their capacity when they go out into the real world of education and employment. When designing the adult learners, there are some things that we want to keep in consideration, because it's vital that we rely upon research in order for us to be able to meet students where they are, and also ensure that we're using evidence-based practices that have been shown to be successful. So what does the research says about adult learning? Research shows that adult learners do best when they are involved in actually choosing how their learning occurs. So those choices of assignments and formats, ensuring that it transforms beyond just compliance into true ownership of what they're learning through their opportunity to choose, make the learning relevant and immediately applicable. Adults need to see how their new skills connect directly to their professional lives. Learners need to be treated as a resource themselves. They bring valuable skills to the learning environment, and we want to ensure that we foster peer sharing. Even in cases where students feel vulnerable at first, when they are integrated in an environment where they have the opportunity to be vulnerable, then it also increases their capacity to be able to uptake evidence-based practices. We ensure that we focus on problem-centered learning. Adults thrive when tackling real challenges, whether they're analyzing cases or responding to classroom scenarios, where they're moving from the abstract to actual real practice. And finally, we want to encourage collaboration and reflection, because learners grow in environments where they can share, they can reflect, and where they can problem solve together. They're able to transform their shared experiences into powerful learning moments.
And if I could jump in for a quick second. So things we wanted to make sure is that we showed you, what is it, the term, the proof is in the pudding. So connecting that theory to practice. So one of the things that we were tasked with the Dream Center was to work on literature reviews of five core areas. And one of them was applying adult learning principles. And our spearhead of this was Dr. Phoenicia Young. She's on here today with us, and she led the team of doc interns, and they did various reviews of different articles, and this information comes from their work. So in the reviews of their work and what they saw the research is saying, we know that things like self-direction, relevance application, problem-centered learning, collaboration, this is what current research is saying. And that's why we want to use these principles to move forward with how we're preparing courses for our adult learners. Next, we're going to talk about enhancing courses for real-world impact.
So we covered the big ideas about theory as it results for adult learners. So there are practical strategies that we want to look at that we can use to refresh and align courses for a deeper, more authentic learning experience for students. So some of those include revitalizing the courses by doing an audit. And it starts by conducting pausing to check that the objectives, the assignments, and that the assessments are truly in sync. They're all complementing each other's. A simple review of two could be to use an alignment in order to indicate whether it is strong, where the strengths are, and where there are adjustments that we might. Next, we want to integrate authentic learning experiences by giving students real world practice through whether they're case studies, community projects, so they move from theory to lived experiences. And we want to embed interdisciplinary perspectives because teaching is never just one subject. Connecting disciplines prepares students for the complexity of what happens in the real world of education. For example, there might be an opportunity if you have a cohort of students like I did, they were all history majors, and I was teaching a special education course, and the students had prepared a reading lesson plan from previous class, and through the special education course, they went back and they redesigned that course, ensuring that they had provided some inclusive classroom evidence-based practices. So that was an opportunity where they got a chance to integrate literacy, history, and also special education evidence-based practices. And finally, we want to ensure that there is flexibility and choice. When students choose topics and formats that fit their professional goals, their motivation grows. Thoughtful choices that are guided by future directions foster a deeper investment in learning. And all of these combined together help to impact students' learning in a successful way. And it also is a part of what we'll want to consider when we're revitalizing our courses. This is a perfect example where we don't have to give up creativity for ensuring that the standards that are being integrated in our planning. These are examples where we have 3 different standards, and we have an example of where you can create ways to involve students in collaboration and to make the interactions more engaging for them. The first standards is demonstrating knowledge of evidence-based practices. Students will be given an opportunity to create a lesson plan in which they test the strategies out, and then they come back and they reflect. The second standard is around collaboration and with families and professionals. Students have an opportunity to be involved in preparing particular roles or integrating or being involved in particular roles where there's a mock IEP presentation, and they're assigned different roles, and they get to understand different perspectives of the individuals in those roles. Their last standard is professional ethics, and here the creative idea in order to integrate collaboration and interaction is having the students to participate in a real life case study where they're involved with ethical dilemma that gives them an opportunity to problem solve and collaborate, which is more in tune with the dynamics that we experience when we're out in the class, when students are going into the classroom and what they would experience in the real world. We've looked at how creativity and standards can work hand in hand. Now let's talk about how AI can be used as a collaborator in the process of revitalizing courses. AI can boost efficiency by handling routine tasks, which frees us up to be more involved in meaningful interaction and moments of teaching students. It acts as a creative partner for idea generation, helping us brainstorm whenever we're stuck. It also can improve the accessibility for students by providing captions or alternative formats, helping us to be able to reach more learners. It helps tailor materials to students' needs and interests, but we also must be mindful of drawbacks, which include the accuracy of the information that AI generates, the biases that are sometimes a part of the AI platform, and sometimes over-reliance in AI can be a real risk because it could take away from creative or critical thinking or analysis skills. We have to remember that if we're going to use AI as a collaborator, that we want to use it as a tool to enhance our work and not replace our expertise. So right now, Maria is going to demonstrate the Google Notebook LM that is also a AI tool that she has found very helpful.
I'm actually going to do a demonstration for you a little bit later, but I did want to share with you because this is actually a recent tool that I've been playing with that I heard from a colleague, and it's an application that goes through Google. It's Notebook LM, and essentially it can help create podcasts of the information you want to share for students. So we're thinking about the new generation of students that we're getting in that they prefer to listen to a podcast on their drive or listen to an article on their drive. So think about it as providing them an article that has been turned into a podcast. So it's more engaging and they're more able to connect with the information. So some of the things that you can do on Notebook LM, which is a free resource also, you can upload resources, PDFs, web pages, YouTube pages. You can ask it to create a summary or generate a summary for you and kind of think about what's the most critical information in these documents that you're sharing with it. You can ask it to create different outputs for you. So perhaps it's a summary, it's a timeline of something they're working on, table of contents. It can be very helpful with creating study guides for students, especially if we're working with maybe some undergraduate students that will have to go through licensure and certification. So helping them create study guides, flashcards for quizzes, audio overviews. It helps create and convert that content into a podcast style conversation, which is interesting because I'm not necessarily an auditory learner. I like visuals more, but there are some individuals, especially like I mentioned, the newer generation, that they prefer listening to things. So why not provide them with these resources and also teach them how to appropriately use these resources? Like we mentioned, like Coretta mentioned, it does not replace our expertise. It should not replace the work that we're doing, but it can be a tool, a partner, a resource for us to kind of enhance what we're working on. And it's also works really well with strong citation and source grounding support. So it's something I definitely think that you guys may want to look into. All right, let's rethink your course assignments. What makes our assignments purposeful, impactful, and authentic, right? We know they're purposeful because we're aligning them with current objectives and professional competencies. We want them to be impactful because we wanted to encourage that critical thinking and reflection. And sometimes our traditional practices, we're not actually getting to that point. We're getting to recall or those preliminary Bloom's taxonomy levels of thinking, but we're not really engaging them and helping them more with that critical thinking piece. And we want it to be very authentic. We want it to mirror tasks that they're going to be using in their professions, things that they can actually expect and see to do, things that we may not have thought of. I know when I did my undergraduate many, many years ago, I learned about all kinds of disabilities, but emotional disabilities, at the time it was emotionally handicapped. And then I remember my first experience, my internship, I was placed in an EH or SED classroom, and I see the teachers holding the kids down, and I'm like, what is happening here? I think something illegal is happening. I don't know what's going on here. And because I had never been exposed to safe crisis management, self-injurious behaviors, how to de-escalate situations without having to get to that point. So it was a piece that I was definitely missing in my education. We also want to think about some common pitfalls that we fall into. Quizzes for recall. Quizzes for recall, you recall that information just in time to pass that quiz, and then after you finish that quiz, you probably forget most of the information. Assignments that seem like busy work, repetitive tasks. Here I'm assigning you a chapter and you're presenting the chapter to the class. We want to elevate that some. And also assignments that are disconnected from their actual practice. Some things that we can think of. So we know that we're focusing through the Dream Center, early intervention, early childhood special education, and also those related services. So we want to create authentic assignments that they can work on that will align with their future career. So when we think about early intervention, developing that family service plan, the IFSP, providing them with a case study so that they can kind of identify things they want to work on, developmental milestones and family goals. We can also think about helping them create a mock home visit and how they would coach parents through pay-based strategies. And then also you'll see an example here on the left, creating a resource guide for families, listing community supports, explaining eligibility for Part C services, explaining the process to be evaluated for Part B services, some things that they can work on that are authentic and it really will connect to their future career. When we think about those early childhood special education teachers, we want them to start learning how to do inclusive lesson plans. We may have some that work in more specific or separate classroom settings, but some of them are working towards like a specialized pre-K classroom where they would have a mix of different developmental levels. So we want to think about those inclusive classroom lessons, working on how they can connect the goals and objectives from an IEP into their classroom. You know, a lot of times we teach them how to write an IEP and how to write a lesson, but we're missing that connection or that bridge of how do I work on the IEP goals that are different for the 12 kids I have in my class to the lesson plan that I'm going to give the one lesson plan to all of these children. They can also work on preparing behavior support plans or thinking about creating visual stories, visual schedules, different kind of visual supports to help with the transitions in early childhood could be a very applicable, authentic assignment that they can work on. For my K through 12 folks out there, that's where I come from, working again on writing those IEP goals and also the progress monitoring plan. We missed that piece too. And how are they monitoring it? How are they collecting information? How are they tracking it? How are they providing it to the families? Analyzing student data and considering what are some evidence-based instructional adjustments that they may want to make to their lessons. And also, one of the things I've noticed too is we focus a lot on, even as K through 12 education, most of our courses are focused on the younger side of it, but actually thinking about working through a transition plan for a high school student. How would that look like? How would we help them prepare for post-secondary education or for employment? And for related services, in here we're thinking about our SLPs, our OTs, our PTs, counselors, school psychologists, those orientation and mobility specialists, social workers. They can work on those interdisciplinary intervention plans. So how are we working across these different disciplinary areas? They can work on drafting the progress reports for families, like how will they communicate how the therapy session went with the child? And that's a big connect that I've seen too, that my child goes to school, my child is limited verbally or not yet verbal. They go and I know they're receiving speech services, but I only see the speech therapist once a year at the IEP meeting, so I don't really know what's going on with my child. So let's brainstorm ideas of how to make that connection so that families are more informed. And you can also consider role-playing a team meeting where they are related services providers and they collaborate on these different items. One of the things I do, I teach a course, Autism Spectrum Disorders for Speech Language Pathologists, and the base of the course is they're given a case study. They're given 4 different case studies to choose from, and throughout the course, they're working on different pieces of that case study. So the first one is to analyze it and come up with your initial treatment plan and goals. So outlining the goals for this child for a few different areas, and then reviewing them so that I can help them make the connections and how it would affect a child with autism. Then considering the actual full treatment plan that would include the evidence-based strategies that we've learned about, how can they apply them, how would they teach parents about them, who are the different team members they would want to have included in implementing this treatment plan. Then they actually create a one-to-one lesson plan that they would do in a speech session with a child with that case study. And then they move on to creating their data collection tools. How would they create, what would data collection look like, and how does it align specifically to the goals that they created? Are the criterion matching? We also think about the visual supports that they're going to provide them. And I have them, even though it's an online class, because they're students from all over the US, I have them create the actual visual supports that they outlined in their treatment plan, in their lesson plan, print them out, laminate them, cover them out, just like you're going to present it to this child so that they get the total experience. So thinking about things that we can do that are reliable, that are relatable to their future careers, but also gets them really interested and engaged with what they're learning. One of the activities I also did for my online class activity, we meet once a week, and I wanted to move away from the I'm just lecturing and they're listening. But sometimes it's hard to get them engaged, especially the classes at 8 o'clock at night. So one of the things every class, I try to incorporate some different interactive class activity that they can work on for 15 minutes or so. This is one of the ones that I did. I created a Padlet that they would answer to. So I provided the first part where you see where it says like group activity and the different things I'm looking for. And then I put them into breakout rooms, and they had to each look for this information based on the identified social communication treatment practice that I outlined for them. So each group had a different social communication intervention, and then they were working on the description, the assessments, they were looking for related articles, but they were doing this, all of this within each other, then coming back to the whole group and sharing what they learned about these different interventions. And sometimes them hearing this information from their peers is more effective than I could have given the hour-long lecture and explained to them these different social communications. But I wanted them to do the practice of going and looking for the information and learning about it themselves and then sharing it out with their peers. Next, we're going to go on to moving beyond discussion posts with Coretta.
Yes, remember we talked about one of the challenges was that we tend to use traditional means of discussion posts. And why are there limitations in using this particular method? Or what are using this particular method without considering alternatives? At times, it ends up being like a surface level response that we get. Traditionally, I can remember from my courses is post once, reply how many times? Twice. Okay. And what ends up happening is it becomes repetitive and disengaging, and students we run out of creative things to say. We end up saying the same things, or we find new ways to say the same things over and over again. And even from the instructor side, when I've use this method, what tends to happen is, for me, I don't know about any of the rest of you, is you run out of ways to be creative in the feedback that you give to. The students' responses are not substantive, which is basically what I've already said. When we are engaging in this way and using this traditional discussion post method, and it doesn't always mirror the type of professional communication that's setting students up for success when they get out into the world and they have to interact and communicate with individuals in different settings, whether it's through IEP meetings or through meetings with individuals within their teams, grade level teams. And that's my background is elementary education and middle school. And so a lot of times, if we're not prepared to learn how to communicate effectively, or we're setting up for students to be able to communicate effectively in these types of ways, then we're not setting up for success when they move into the actual classroom setting. And the feedback tends to be formulaic rather than constructive that students are receiving. So it is up to us to be able to come up with creative ways in which we can engage students beyond the traditional discussion posts. So right now we're going to do a poll.
We're going to do a poll, and we're going to look into what innovative engagement strategies have you tried in your courses? I like the peer review and feedback. I know one time students gave a class presentation, but then I also had their peers anonymously complete like a form and give them feedback, helpful feedback, things that they could do, they can improve on, because I knew that those students would be then soon going out to conferences and presenting live in front of people. And I wanted them to have that feedback so they can kind of incorporate it into their practice. So I'm going to end the poll so we can see all of our results.
Okay, all right. So when we're reimagining how we can move, reimagining discussion posts in order to engage students in new ways beyond using the traditional discussion boards, a lot of the things that you've already talked about, so a lot of these things you're already doing. So using multimedia responses like video or podcasts so students can communicate creatively for real audience is a very popular thing to do, because we know an interesting way for students to be able to give their interpretation and feedback as it relates to, let's say, if they had to do a scenario or a case study and they had to be able to justify their answers or their responses, then the use of a podcast or another type of interactive feedback method that way would probably be a good way, other than a traditional discussion board. And also getting feedback from peers. Build connections through peer interviews that bring outside perspectives from individuals that might be in the particular area that they're interested in moving into. Encouraging collaborative creations with group tools like the Padlet or Canva for shared reflective projects. I can remember using Go React, which is a great resource where you can give feedback right in that particular moment and right in time based upon the areas where there's a need for growth for students. Assign authentic real-world problem-solving tasks and use role-based simulations such as, and we've already talked about that, mock IEP meetings to help students apply classroom learnings in practice. And each of these strategies can turn a discussion into a meaningful opportunity to communicate, to reflect, and to collaborate. And this prepares students again for real impactful work beyond the classroom. And it's important that students are able to give each other feedback, because a lot of times the feedback that we're giving to them, it could be taken up better if it's provided through peer interactions. And it also gives students an opportunity to mirror the learning that they have gained through their courses by being able to give feedback that is related to the standards or the content that they're studying within their classrooms. This is one of my favorite things as it relates to having students interact, is around case studies. But in this case, this is a unique way of doing it. And perhaps some of you do this, where you have students look at a particular scenario. In this particular role-based simulation, we have Marcos, and individuals take on assigned roles, whether it's a general educator, teacher, special education teacher, parent, guardian, school administrator, or related service personnel. And based upon their role, their particular tasks that the individual is responsible for undertaking in that role. And the discussion prompt is to determine how to best support Marcos in order to determine his eligibility for special education. How is it that you're going to communicate the plan to the family, and how will progress be monitored? When we engage individuals through this type of role-based simulation as an alternative to a traditional discussion post, it gives each individual an opportunity to take the perspective of similarly to what they would experience if they were doing a mock IEP meeting. And it also prepares them for understanding the particular language that they're using. And if we incorporate recording this, then they have an opportunity to go back and see how they presented themselves during that interaction, their tone, their body language, and their use of language. Was there a use of too much jargon that for parents might be hard for them to understand? And it gives them an opportunity to practice in a less threatening type setting in preparation for what they'll meet when they go out into a real classroom setting and they're working with individuals in a collaborative way. This shift is about transforming discussion from a one-way exchange into active learning experiences for not only the students, but also for instructors. When we design spaces that mirror the authentic professional dialogue and challenge students to think critically and invite them to express ideas through multiple modalities, we're moving from a static post to dynamic interactions where they're going to be able to translate the research into action that builds their confidence and communication skills, which also empowers them and helps with their self-efficacy as it relates to their capacity to be able to go out into the real world and have the expertise to do well. Okay, here is an example of palette, which was one of the ideas that was mentioned as an alternative for vitalizing online engagement. And I have not necessarily used palette before, but I challenged myself when I was preparing for this particular piece that we're doing today. And the link for the tutorial took about 10 minutes, and creating the palette took about 10 minutes. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to scan the QR code or to share strategies that make course discussions more authentic, interactive, and meaningful, or post an idea or an example of how you moved beyond the traditional posts. And you've kind of already done this before, but maybe you want to, if there's an idea that you've heard thus far that you want to share, then please do so in the palette.
All right, so I'm going to give them a couple seconds to scan it, and then once I move to the Padlet, I'll put the link in the chat in case some of you find it a little bit easier just to click on the link. And when you're working with Padlet, there's different ways that you can do it. You can create post-its, or you can have different sections of information. You can have students create a resource guide for a family as if it was a Padlet. So you would come to the plus button on the bottom right hand of your screen. Mouse is acting up. And then you can click anywhere, make something. So, and then you'll see my post. And then others can comment and they can like on it. But we invite all of you now to take a couple minutes and share your idea with us. All right, so we'll keep this live and we'll share it again also with you in your follow-up email so you guys can continue to contribute and add some ideas about some of the ways that you move beyond discussion posts, and maybe you'll learn from your peers.
Okay, from static posts to dynamic interaction, revitalizing online engagement means taking the time to plan alternatives to the static posts that can transform students from passive responders into active co-creators of knowledge. And we saw many examples through like the palette, also the simulation example that was provided with providing recommendations as it related to work with a particular student Marcos. And it also gives students an opportunity when we integrate this into revitalizing our courses to have students to express their creativity and personalize the ways in which they're learning and providing engaging ways for learning for them to be authentic. And when we're actually embedded in it, when they're actually embedded in it, then it's helping them to be able to create opportunities where the learning is going to be more lasting because they're not static. They're not just sitting there receiving it, they're actually involved in it. So if we're reimagining how students learn, it's very important that we think about ways to have them connect the learning to practices, linking it to academic concepts that mirror real world challenges. We're encouraging that active participation shifting from that passive to the active, making them co-creators of the knowledge. And we're sparking that creativity and motivation and allowing them to express themselves in more meaningful and innovative ways. And this is the same thing we'll want them to do when they have students in their classrooms.
All right, let's think about focusing now on providing feedback to students and also directions to students. So we want to think about developing clear and informative rubrics, but there are ways to do it that don't take time out of our busy schedules. So one of the things is sometimes I inherit a course from someone, and I always try to think and look at it as I was not too long ago a graduate student. What would I look for in a rubric that really lets me know and outlines what's expected of me and what I'm going to be graded on? So if you notice on the left, you'll see an example of a rubric for an IRIS module. It's for 5 points, and it says the IRIS module initial thoughts. This area will be used for the assessor to leave comments on the criterion. So obviously I wanted to add comments to the criterion. There was one for letting them look at 3 points for the module assessment, and they get 1 point for the wrap up. But I felt that the students needed much more information of what's expected of them. So all I did was I went to my colleague ChatGPT and I put the directions for the assignment into it and I asked it to create a rubric for me. And we're going to practice one of those. And one of my rule of thumbs for ChatGPT is, or another similar AI is, if it's not something that I'm saying that I'm the author of, I'm not saying I'm going to publish this. I'm not saying that this was fully written by Maria Silva. I'm not trying to claim anything for it. I'll use ChatGPT to help me create some things and the resources, right? Because it's not that it's things that I could not do as a professional or a scholar. It's just if I did work on them, it would take a lot more of my time that I could be dedicating to other things. But then this twofold. Now it's for giving the student feedback. Now, as a professor and adjunct, when I provide feedback, sometimes I'm grading them. And when I was grading assignments that didn't have a rubric, I would say, well, I think this one is excellent and this one should be satisfactory. And then am I really consistently grading the students the same across all of the students in the class when I'm kind of, maybe I graded 3 assignments today and 5 of them tomorrow, and my mood or my thought today is a lot different than the one from tomorrow, right? So am I really consistently giving them the right feedback? So when I provided more specific details, the completion of the module, it is to thoroughly complete all module sections, initial thoughts, wrap up, and assessment in clear and detailed responses will get you an excellent point versus you'll get needs improvement if you only partially completed the module sections. And I can still add additional feedback, but it's easier for me to just go in and say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. You knew what I was looking for, and these are the things that you received, and the points that you earned. And it made it a lot clearer for the students, and it's been a lot more helpful for me as I proceed with my grading practices. So when we think about rubrics, why they matter for the clarity, for the transparency, and the guidance. Because also times I'll think, oh, I expected them to do this, but I'll look back on my assignment directions and my rubric, and if I didn't explicitly state that they had to do it, I couldn't really remove points for them for that if I didn't express it or state it in advance. And I wouldn't do that to a student if they didn't know that that was an expectation. So that's something I had to learn in my own practice. And creating these rubrics provides that clarity for them, that transparency. And then I always tell them, go to the rubric. If you're not sure what to do, go to the rubric because I provided very clear directions for you. So it also provides opportunities for them to grow because it provides that formative feedback, exactly what I was looking for, why you received a 1 point, and you can compare that to what a 3 was, and you can see what's missing. And again, like I mentioned, it promotes that equity. It's fair and consistent across grading all of my students because I'm using the same grade rubric for that assignment. Some examples of effective rubrics for authentic assignments. So think about assigning a case study analysis, right? And we're going to be looking for certain things for them. I can plug in this criteria into something similar to ChatGPT or ChatGPT, and it will help me create the rubric for the students, right? And again, as we mentioned, you use it as a tool as your partner, but it doesn't replace it, and you still have to check it for accuracy and for bias. So I want to make sure that even though it created it for me, is that really what I expected? Is that really what I'm looking for? Just so that I can ensure that it's a valuable resource to share with them. If they're working on a family communication project, maybe I want my criteria to be the clarity of their communication, the cultural responsiveness, or the practicality of the resource. If I want them to practice writing their IEP goals, is it measurable? It's, think about the SMART. Is it measurable? Does it align with what they need, with the students' needs? Does it adhere to standards, right? Is it time-based? So I can plug these in. So some some pro tips when you're using these is to be descriptive in your performance levels. So it helps the students clearly understand the assignment and the expectations, but it also serves as that valuable feedback tool. And some examples of those descriptive performance levels could be exemplary, proficient, developing, and needs improvement. So we're going to practice one. I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm going to give you an example. So first, I had to create the assignment. I know what I want, but I wanted to ask ChatGPT to help me. So I gave it this prompt, and I usually don't read things off the slide, but I want you to see what I wrote. So I put draft a case study about a second grade student receiving special ed services who continues to struggle with reading comprehension. The case study will be assigned to graduate students, and they'll be tasked with analyzing the case study, applying theory, and proposing an evidence-based support or intervention for their case study. So this is what I asked GPT, and this is what it gave me within seconds. It gave me background information about a child named Marcus, that he has a specific learning disability. He's receiving tier 3 support, intervention support. He gets the pull-out resource model. It talks about his current academic performance, how he's able to increase his accuracy, but he still has difficulty understanding words. It gives me some previous data from him on his benchmarks assessments, such as the DIBELS and the iReady. It tells me feedback of what the teacher is saying about them, what are some instructional supports in place for the child already. And then I'll show you later, it also even provides me with feedback from the parent. And this is all ChatGPT thought of on its own. I didn't ask them to give me all of this. I just said, give me a case study. And I could say, give me 5 case studies, and it will create 5 different case studies. And then I can just check real quick if it's something that I want, if it applies, and if it makes sense to the student. But it saves so much time, and it's an applicable real world thing that is one of our scholars is going to be doing in their practice. This is the second part that it gave me. It automatically gave me and drafted directions for the student. It automatically told me at the end, analyze the case study to identify the contributing factors, apply theoretical frameworks such as cognitive, behavioral, or constructivist, propose evidence-based intervention plan, and an outline for the student. And I can even take this and say, make these directions even more explicit for the student. And then I check to make sure if that's what I'm expecting, and also if it aligns with the specific standards in my state and my university. All right. I'm going to show you an example. We're going to create it together. So now I'm going to ask ChatGPT to create for me a rubric with these 4 criteria areas. So first I want to show you that I was truthful. I specifically asked ChatGPT this. It gave me all of this: their background, his current academic performance, instructional support, social and behavioral observations, family and home support, and then it drafted these student assignment directions, right? So I'm going to take this information, I'm going to simply cut and paste it, and I'm going to say draft a rubric worth a total of 20 points using these 4 criteria areas. I'm going to put accuracy of analysis, application of theory. It's lucky for you guys, I can type fast. Proposed evidence-based intervention. And even if I misspell things, it understands what I want. Intervention and quality of writing. Now I'm going to say using this case study information. And I will cut and paste what it already gave me. Where's my mouse? And here is my 20-point rubric. So it outlined exemplary, proficient, developing, needs improvement. So what do I want the student to know? I want them to know that the accuracy of their analysis should provide thorough, insightful analysis of the case, clearly identify and explain the multiple contributing factors affecting Marcus reading comprehension, such as decoding, vocabulary, attention, motivation, instruction, and demonstrate deep understanding of assessment. But if you don't do all of that, a 1 to 2 points is going to get you analysis is incomplete, it's inaccurate, it lacks understanding of case details, key factors, or misinterpreted. So think about it. It's not something that we couldn't do as scholars, as instructors, as professors. Yes, we can draft this out on our own. This is information that we know from our practice. But this took me 2 seconds to do, and it saves me the time that I need. So now I can think of more creative event activities and supports for my students. So it's a great tool. And like I mentioned, we want to remain with our ethical integrity. You also want to consider what is acceptable about university. At your university and organization, we are moving towards a time where AI is more accepted. However, you still want to make sure you're following the guidelines at your university. But think about applying tools like this and how easy it makes things that you're working on so that you can start thinking about more thought-provoking, authentic assignments. And you can even give it an old assignment and say, can you help me generate ideas of how to make this more engaging, more relevant, more thought-provoking to my students? And it'll draft you several ideas that then you can spearhead from there.
This section ties the entire process together, showing how intentional course design and authentic engagement don't just update a class, they transform it into a cohesive, practice-ready learning experience for our scholars. So what are we looking at? To bring everything full circle, here's a quick recap. We started with course design, focusing on aligning content to course standards while building meaningful career-connected experiences that get students ready for practice. Next, we explored assignments that go beyond measuring knowledge and then link directly to real-world work in fields like early intervention, special education, related services. For engagement, we moved away from old discussion board routines and embraced multimedia posts, the ideal of peer interviews, collaborative projects that mirror authentic professional communication. And we wrapped up with rubrics, emphasizing how clear, transparent assessment supports equity and growth. And together, these strategies create a unified approach, revitalizing courses and building a vital bridge between theory and professional practices. Let's connect this to grant writing requirements and program outcomes to get a sense of an advancement. Aligning with standards and embedding real-world competencies strengthen the instructional quality and also strengthens the scholars' learning and practices by having them practice on skills they'll need in the field. The assignments that they undertake mirror the real responsibilities in careers like special education, early childhood education, early interventions, and related services, and prepare them not just to graduate, but to thrive professionally. When we ground the engagement in evidence-based practices and clear rubrics, the learning becomes consistent, measurable, and tied directly to both growth and program outcomes. Building courses this way makes them sustainable and adaptable, supporting not only our students currently, but also future cohorts, cross-program collaborations within interdisciplinary type emphasis, and lasting program excellence. Each enhancement strengthens students' learning, institutional goals, and links the revitalized teaching to true program impact. At the heart of course revitalization is intentional design, which is what we've been talking about. as we've gone through this presentation is not just adding tools or updating assignments, but building courses that bridge the theory with the practice, is strengthening professional readiness, and is driving program excellency and impact. When we do this, we want to be thoughtful and strategic, and we want to ensure that we're grounding the standards while always keeping our scholars at the center. The result is teaching that feels current today and will remain sustainable tomorrow. And this brings everything full circle. And the hope is that this professional readiness and this connection to program excellency will lead to impactful changes in scholars as it relates to their being able to go out into the profession and do great things. So this is going to take us into wrapping up and any questions that you have and takeaways and thoughts about the presentation.
So, I've had the opportunity to meet several of you at different conferences, and I love hearing your ideas and your feedback. So, we posed 3 questions here, and you can pick any of the questions and unmute yourself. But I would love to hear if you have any elaborations on any strategies that you've already tried, any things you've done to assignments, maybe some of the things that we've discussed today that have worked well for you, or maybe they didn't work well, or maybe you want to give us some ideas of tools or templates or other applications that we can use, and also maybe think about what's one strategy from today's session that you want to try, that you want to implement. So feel free to unmute yourself, share your feedback and your ideas or your experiences, because that's what we're here for, is to learn from each other. All right, I'm going to pose a challenge then. We're going to start with Dr. Young. Dr. Young, have you used any of these strategies, or do you find any of these helpful that you may want to move in the future?
I've used Padlet before.
How'd that work out for you?
It worked out well. I used it as a discussion post, and I like it because you're not able to just write words. You can post pictures as well as a response. So that's one tool I've used before.
All right, thank you. You can even like post links and stuff that they can access.
And you can like it, heart it. There are different things you can interact with on Padlet.
Thank you. All right, now I'm going to ask Dr. Kramer.
I've also used Padlet. I know I've shared with you, I haven't used ChatGPT yet. It's on my to-do list. I might need a private tutorial getting ready for that. But I will tell you, my best strategy is using my doctoral students who are more creative than I am with using some AI and also just having some innovative features that they've enjoyed in other classes. And I love involving doctoral students and helping with my course redesign to keep things fresh. I think as a faculty member, especially when you've been teaching courses for a really long time, they're kind of good enough, they're working. So it's hard to imagine like putting a lot of time into rethinking them. I think when it's time to look at the program because you're either designing a new program like the X's, or because you're, funding a program that you really want to have strong and exciting for maybe some new folks coming in through like 325M funding, I think that's a good moment to really take stock of what you're doing. And I think sometimes it's scary because you're used to being an expert as a professor. So like asking for help, particularly from newer folks like doc students or assistant professors, can be a little daunting, but I think that's honestly where my courses have improved the most, when I've partnered with others who are a little newer, a little fresher, have some innovations I'm not as familiar with. I think that's really worked well. But yes, Padlet is one that you showed today that I've definitely used.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you brought that up, in context of their grant, because one of the biggest components also is the recruitment and also the retention of these scholars in your programs, right? You want them to stay in your program, you want them to be engaged in your program, but you also want to recruit them and have them excited about your program. So if we bring them in and we are showing them outdated stuff, we focus so much on what's the most current research, but we also want to think about what our most current learners interested in and how can we engage them. And then also think about it, especially for those who are preparing educators, teaching them that learning can be fun and engaging and they can change it up a little bit, can help them see how their future career as an educator, they can still make learning fun and engaging and innovative, because oftentimes we're concerned about, I have to prepare for a test, I have to see the data, I have to see the scores. I was a teacher for 15 years, And I wanted to consistently find ways to still motivate my students to be engaged with me and not just teach to the test. So if we're modeling that in our courses and we're teaching it to them, then they will move forward in their careers and they can do the same things. And I do see that we have some things in the chat. So we had some that agreed with using Padlet. Rachel mentioned chat, Padlet, and also hypothesis, which I'm not familiar with, so I'll have to learn about it. Brigida mentioned that she uses ChatGPT to create case studies, scenarios, and rubrics. It's very helpful and it has saved her a great deal of time. I 100% agree. That's why I'm trying to bring Dr. Kramer to the dark side. So I appreciate that. And Frigida also mentioned that the polls are a quick way to check for understanding. I know one of my peers in the doc program, she taught me a lot about Nearpod and she used it extensively. And just seeing that application, all the resources that are available helped make things fun and engaging in class. And Shweta was kind enough to share the hypothesis application. So I needed that so that I can look into it.
Yeah, I've used Hypothesis for that same special education course that I mentioned. And the way that I used it is that students all had an opportunity to be divided into groups and they had to provide annotation within their groups around a particular article that they were reading.
Yep, it definitely keeps them engaging and brings them in and teaches them about new tools. And like Liz mentioned, also definitely call on if you have doc students to help you because they're going to need this application to their future careers. So why not help them revitalize some of your things? So before we move forward, just want to recap and see, are there any questions that are still pending or anything, comments that you wanted to make? And Coretta and I will be sharing soon a fun infographic with some of these ideas and tips that you can keep with you and refer to in the future. All right, well, if there's no questions, just a reminder for those of you, well, all of you are grantees of ours, so reminder, use the resources in your Dream On portal. We do have resources for all of the main areas, our early intervention, early childhood, special education related services, and you're going to find all kinds of things, data reports, publications, faculty guides, grant management, and we're continually trying to find new resources to add on to it and also create our own resources to share.